I was on the back deck tightening a loose board when my phone buzzed on the railing beside me. It was late afternoon. The light had that soft, slanted look it gets in the mountains, and the only sound was wind moving through the trees below the ridge. I'd been working slowly, no rush, just enjoying having nowhere else to be. The message was from my sister. "He's already getting interest. You don't need to overthink this." I read it once. Then I turned the phone face down and went back to the board. I had retired 3 months earlier after 31 years with the fire department in Raleigh. Most of my career was spent answering calls that never came at a good time. Alarms, radios, sirens cutting through sleep. You learn to live in a constant state of readiness. Even on your days off, your body never really settles. That was the reason for the cabin. I bought it 2 years before I retired. 5 acres in the western part of North Carolina, just over an hour from where I used to live. Nothing fancy, about 1,100 square feet. 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace that actually held heat. A narrow wraparound porch with a view that changed every hour of the day. When I first walked through it, the place smelled like old wood and pine cleaner. The floors creaked in a familiar way, not broken, just honest. The previous owner had taken care of it. I didn't plan to change much. After my retirement dinner, I sold my house in town and moved up here full-time. My wife, Ellen, passed away 5 years ago. Quietly, too fast. Our daughter lives in Colorado with her family. Our son's in Ohio. We talk often. They know this place isn't about isolation. It's about rest. Most mornings I wake up before the sun. I make coffee, sit on the deck, and watch the fog lift out of the valley. No radio, no schedule, just the day unfolding. That peace mattered to me more than I realized. A week after I moved in, my sister Karen called. She didn't waste time. "So," she said, "I hear you finally escaped." I smiled. "Feels that way." There was a pause. I knew that pause. It usually meant she was building up to something. "Mark's been going through a phase," she said. Mark is her son, 28, smart, restless, always between plans. Over the last few years, he'd jumped from one idea to the next. Online coaching, a wellness brand, some kind of crypto consulting. Nothing ever stuck long enough to finish. "What kind of phase?" I asked. "He's into remote work now, retreats, experiences. He thinks people don't want stuff anymore. They want environments." I leaned back in my chair and watched a hawk circle above the tree line. "He's been looking at properties," she continued. "The prices are insane. Then I remembered your place." I didn't respond right away. Karen filled the silence. "Just temporarily. A few months, to help him get started." I told her the cabin wasn't an investment property, that it was my home, that I came here specifically to be away from noise and traffic and other people's schedules. She said she understood. Then she said, "I just thought you'd want to help family." We ended the call politely. I assumed that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, I came back from the hardware store and found a car I didn't recognize parked beside my truck. Mark was standing on my deck, phone held out in front of him, taking pictures of the view. He turned when he heard me and smiled like this was all perfectly normal. "Uncle Dave," he said, "this place is even better in person." That was the moment I realized the quiet I'd worked so hard for was about to be tested, and standing there, keys still in my hand, I understood something else too. This wasn't going to be a misunderstanding that fixed itself. I walked up the steps and waited for him to finish the photo. Then I spoke. And after that, everything started moving very quickly. I didn't know yet how many people would be involved or how official it would become, but I would. Then I waited. Mark didn't put the phone away right away. He tapped the screen a few more times, stepped closer to the railing, adjusted his angle, then finally lowered his arm like the moment had passed. "Mom said you wouldn't mind," he said, casual. "I just wanted to see the place in person." I unlocked the door without answering. The wood swelled in the summer heat and needed a little shoulder to open. He followed me inside like he belonged there. The cabin was cool. The ceiling fan clicked once before settling into its slow rhythm. I could smell the coffee grounds from that morning, faint but familiar. Mark looked around, nodding to himself. "This is perfect," he said. "The beams, the light. People love this kind of authenticity." "It's not for rent," I said. He waved a hand like I'd mentioned the weather. "That's not what this is. This is a collaboration." I set my keys on the counter, took off my jacket, gave myself a moment to stand still. "Karen asked," I said. I told her no. "Right," he said, smiling. "But I think she explained it wrong." He pulled a tablet from his bag and started swiping before I could respond. Photos of modern cabins, websites with clean fonts, charts with smooth upward lines. He talked steadily, calm, confident, like he'd rehearsed it. "Remote teams are burned out," he said. "They want focus, nature, fast Wi-Fi, a place that feels intentional. This area is hot right now." I watched his finger move across the screen. 6 guests, he continued. 200 a night per person. Conservative numbers. We'd only book part of the month. "We?" I asked. He glanced up. "You and me." I shook my head once. "I'm not interested." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You don't even want to look?" "I don't need to." The room went quiet. Outside, something moved through the brush near the creek. Leaves rustled, then stopped. "You're sitting on a gold mine," he said finally. "And you're just, what, going to read books out here?" "Yes," I said. "That's the plan." He laughed under his breath. Not mean, just dismissive. "That's kind of selfish, don't you think?" I didn't respond. I walked to the sink and rinsed my mug. Behind me, his tone shifted, softer, reasonable. "I'd handle everything," he said. "Marketing, guests, cleaning. You wouldn't even notice." "I'd notice," I said. "It's my house." He stood up, left the tablet on the table. "Just think about it," he said. "No pressure." He headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh," he added, "I already secured the domain, just a placeholder." The door closed before I could answer. That night, the cabin didn't feel the same. Not wrong, just alert. Like a room after an argument, even when no one's speaking. I didn't check the website. I didn't call Karen. I told myself Mark would lose interest like he always did. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was splitting wood. Unknown number. "Hi," a woman said. "I'm calling about availability in October." I leaned the axe against the stump. "Availability for what?" "The retreat," she said. "I found you online." I wrote the number down. Slowly. Thanked her. Hung up. Then I went inside and opened my laptop. The site loaded fast, clean, professional. Photos of my deck, my view, my living room, my phone number at the bottom. I closed the laptop and sat there without moving. Then I picked up the phone and called Mark. It went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I opened a notebook and wrote down the date and time. Then I waited. By the end of that week, the calls didn't stop. Different area codes, different voices, teams, couples. One guy asked about bandwidth speeds. Another wanted to know if the porch furniture could be rearranged for group sessions. I answered each call the same way. Calm, brief. "There's no retreat here," I said. "You'll need to contact the person who took your payment." Most of them paused. A few apologized. One swore under his breath before hanging up. I kept notes, dates, times, names when they gave them. I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't explain the situation. I didn't raise my voice. I just documented. On Monday morning, I drove into town and sat across from a man named Paul Henderson. He'd handled my property closing and still had the file. He adjusted his glasses and scrolled through the website on his screen. "This is your primary residence?" he asked. "Yes." "And you never signed anything authorizing commercial use?" "No." He nodded once. "That helps." He drafted a cease and desist letter while I watched. Clear language, specific dates, a deadline. He sent it electronically and by certified mail. "Most people fold after this," he said. "If not, we escalate." That afternoon, Mark showed up again. This time he didn't smile. "You went legal," he said, standing just inside the doorway. That's extreme. I asked you to take it down, I said. You didn't. He stepped farther in, voice tight. You're overreacting. This is momentum. You don't kill momentum. I don't run businesses, I said. I run my life. He shook his head. You're thinking emotionally. I looked at him for a long second. Then I said, you listed my home without permission. That's not emotional. That's factual. He stared at me like I'd changed languages. I already took deposits, he said. I can't unwind that. That's not my problem, I said. He laughed once, sharp. You'd really let me fail like this? I didn't answer. He left angry, loud steps, no goodbye. 2 days later, a real estate agent called. She said her client had seen my property listed as a turnkey business opportunity. Asking price, $600,000. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Paul. That changes things, he said, after I read him the listing. That's misrepresentation, potential fraud. He asked me to send screenshots. I did. Every page, every timestamp. He filed for an injunction that afternoon. The hearing was set for the following week. In the meantime, I installed cameras, changed locks, logged every interaction. Karen called nightly, sometimes crying, sometimes angry, always the same message. You didn't have to do this. I didn't argue. I let the calls go to voicemail. On Thursday, while I was in town grabbing lunch, my phone rang again. Sheriff's Department. There were people on my deck. They said they'd paid to be there. I drove back slowly, steadily. When I pulled in, Mark was standing between 2 deputies talking fast. He saw me and pointed. There he is, he said. Tell them we're good. I stepped out of the truck and shut the door. Then I waited for the deputy to ask me a question. He did, and I answered it, truthfully, one sentence at a time. The deputy asked if I owned the property. Yes, I said. He asked if I had given anyone permission to run a business there. No. That was it. No speeches, no explanations. The group on the deck shifted when they heard that. One woman folded her arms. A man checked his phone, scrolling fast, like he might find something that made this make sense. Mark stepped in again. We have a family agreement, he said. Verbal. The deputy looked at him. Do you have anything in writing? Mark hesitated. Just a second. Long enough. The deputy nodded and turned back to me. Sir, do you want them removed? Yes. The word came out clean, no edge, no rush. The guests were told they needed to leave, that if they'd paid money, it was a civil matter. One of them started arguing with Mark right there on the deck. Voices rose, phones came out. Someone demanded a refund. I stood back near the truck and waited. It took almost half an hour before the driveway was empty again. The deputies took statements. One of them suggested I consider pressing charges. I told him I'd speak to my attorney. When they left, the quiet came back slowly, like it had to find its way in again. I sat at the kitchen table and didn't move for a while. Then I opened my notebook. Step 1. Screenshots already saved. Step 2. Police report number. Step 3. Follow up with Paul. That night I slept with the phone on the nightstand instead of the dresser. The hearing was 4 days later. Mark showed up with a lawyer I didn't recognize. Karen sat behind him, arms crossed, staring at the back of my head. Paul laid everything out. Timelines, listings, payment confirmations, the second website, the attempted sale. The judge didn't interrupt much. When Mark's lawyer tried to frame it as a family misunderstanding, she stopped him. This isn't confusion, she said. This is unauthorized commercial use and misrepresentation. The injunction was granted. Immediate shutdown. Refunds ordered. No contact with the property. Outside, Karen told me I'd gone too far. I didn't respond. Back at the cabin, I changed the routine, locked the gate, checked the cameras, made tea instead of coffee that night. A month later, Karen's husband called. He apologized, quietly, said Mark was dealing with consequences now, real ones. I listened, thanked him, hung up. The leaves started turning soon after. One evening, while sweeping the deck, my phone buzzed. A message from a neighbor I barely knew. Hey, It read. Different situation, but I might need some advice. I set the broom down and looked out at the trees. Then I put the phone face down and waited. The confrontation didn't happen the way people imagine those things do. There was no shouting, no dramatic moment in a parking lot, no final speech. It happened in a quiet courtroom on a Thursday morning. Mark sat at the table with his attorney, leaning back a little too far in his chair, arms crossed like he was waiting out bad weather. Karen sat behind him, stiff, her purse clutched in both hands. She didn't look at me. I sat next to Paul. I had a folder on my lap. Nothing thick, just organized. When the judge asked questions, I answered them directly. Yes, I live there full time. No, I never agreed to any business use. Yes, I asked repeatedly for the listings to be taken down. No, they weren't. Mark's lawyer spoke longer than necessary. He used phrases like good faith and family understanding. He talked about time invested, effort, potential income. The judge listened. Then she leaned forward. Your client advertised property he does not own, she said. Accepted money under false pretenses. Attempted to sell an asset that isn't his. She looked at Mark. This court isn't here to referee family dynamics, she continued. We're here to address conduct. Mark opened his mouth, closed it again. The order was clear, all listings removed, all deposits returned, no contact, no presence on the property. Any violation would carry consequences. When it was over, people stood up slowly, chairs scraped, papers were gathered. Outside the courtroom, Karen finally spoke to me. You could have stopped this earlier, she said. Her voice was tight, controlled, like mine usually is. I tried, I said. You didn't have to humiliate him. I didn't, I said. He did, she shook her head. You chose rules over family. I thought about that for a moment. No, I said. I chose reality. Mark walked past us without saying a word. Back home, I parked the truck and sat for a minute before going inside. The house was exactly as I'd left it. No surprises, no noise. I checked the cameras. Nothing. That night, I opened the folder again, reviewed it. Then I put it away in the file cabinet with the house documents, where it belonged. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They came in pieces, paperwork, emails, quiet confirmations. Over the next 2 weeks, Paul forwarded me copies of refund demands from people who had booked stays. Some were polite, some weren't. All of them were addressed to Mark. I wasn't copied after that, which was fine. It meant the boundary was holding. The second website disappeared first, then the main one. Search results went blank. The phone stopped ringing. I kept my routine steady on purpose. Morning coffee, short walk down to the creek. Light work around the cabin, reading in the afternoon when the sun hit the west side of the porch. One evening, a deputy I'd spoken to earlier stopped by. Not officially, just a courtesy. Everything's been quiet, he said. No further complaints. Good, I said. He nodded. You did the right thing. I didn't respond to that. I just thanked him for letting me know. A few days later, Karen's husband, Mike, called. He sounded tired. I should have stepped in earlier, he said. This got out of hand. Yes, I said. There was a pause. Then he added, Mark's dealing with small claims now, creditors. It's sobering. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I meant it, in the way you mean things without taking them on. Mike sighed. For what it's worth, I get why you did what you did. We talked for another minute. Then we hung up. That was the last call. The locks stayed changed, the cameras stayed on, but slowly I stopped checking them as often. Nothing else happened. No surprise visits, no new listings, no messages asking to talk things through. Just quiet. This morning I wiped down the kitchen counters and put the kettle on. The windows were open. Cool air moved through the room, carrying the smell of leaves and damp earth. Somewhere down the ridge, a woodpecker tapped once, then went quiet. I poured the tea and carried it out to the deck. Nothing needed fixing, nothing needed deciding. That's what peace looks like, I've learned. Not excitement, not relief, just order staying in place. Every so often, someone in town still brings it up, not in detail, just a glance and a comment about that situation with your nephew. I nod. We move on. I don't explain myself anymore. A few weeks ago, a neighbor mentioned his brother-in-law had been asking strange questions about zoning and short-term rentals. Different people, same tone. I told him to keep records, to be clear, to stay calm. Then I let it go. That's the boundary. You give what's reasonable. You don't carry what isn't yours. If you've been listening and this story felt familiar in any way, you're not alone. These situations rarely announce themselves loudly. They start small, casual, reasonable, until they aren't. If this story helped you think more clearly about your own boundaries, feel free to let me know. And if you'd like to stay with stories like this, quiet, real, and grounded, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. It helps the channel reach the right people. I'd also love to hear where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read those comments more than you might think. 2 more stories will be up next. Different situations. Same calm ending. Thanks for spending this time with me.